present situation is that China has such wealth as probably never been amassed in one country in the history of the world. They save like 40% of their GDP and have millions in reserves in the trillions, in the reserves in the government, and the citizens save, they estimate 35% of their income, and they have trillions there too to invest in the stock market or whatever. Now, to the interbank people, this is see former videos. This is a huge plum, and their sole purpose in life is to make money, to install their central banks like the Federal Reserve in other countries like parasites, and then to control that money and the interest rates. Of course, if you can do that in a country, you have monopoly on the country's currency and the interest rates, you can make just about as much money as you want, causing boom and bust cycles and all kinds of things like the stock market crash of 1929 in the U.S. and the 2008 real estate crash. And they've done it in the Federal Reserve, and other central banks around the world do the same thing. Now, so here we are in late October 2020, and the interbank people have been looking at China and those trillions and trillions of dollars. And of course, they want to get to it. Of course, that's their business. That's their raison d'etre. It's hard to imagine that somebody's life is like that they will, even at the expense of millions of people dying, they will single-mindedly go after money like that. Their families make income on the order of small countries' GDP. So these people are the best in the world, and the interbank people are one of the most powerful groups in the world, which is why you don't hear about them much. So how does interbank get to China? Okay, because President Xi is not going to allow them to install a central bank. No country really welcomes these people, but they force them one way or another, causing a war, causing all kinds of mayhem, to get the government to concede, like they did with the U.S. Congress, to grant one of their central bank corporations, like the Federal Reserve corporations, to give them a monopoly on the country's currency and the interest rate. Okay, because this way, when a government wants to borrow money, they have to go to this fake central bank, like the Federal Reserve, and ask for them to print up some money for them. And so that Federal Reserve prints up on their computers. They don't have anything in reserve. They're not a bank at all. And they print up these computer dollars and press send and send it over to the bank account of the U.S. government or any government. And then they charge that government interest on the money, the amount of money, the dollar, that they just sent over. Even though they didn't have it, they can charge interest. And the interbank folks forced host governments to give them this right. And they've done so in the United States. And so when the U.S. Government wanted to send a stimulus package of $3 trillion around the country, they went to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve typed up 3 trillion computer credits and sent it over, and then they're charging the U.S. government interest on those $3 trillion. It's a very nice day at the office for the interbank people, right? Well, that's exactly what happened. Well, what does this work? Well, it devalues the U.S. dollar, you see. And and the Federal Reserve is saying they're going to print up as much money as is necessary to get the country out of the doldrums. Well, you see, what doldrums? Well, the paranoia of COVID-19, right? COVID-19 is the disease. SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. And there's nothing wrong with antibodies. But now CDC lists that there are 40 million cases around the world, of COVID-19. Well, these are tested positive. These aren't diseases cases, okay? We have in the United States alone around 40 million cases, actual people in bed of the influenza flu every year. Now, these are people in bed, sick. These aren't testing positive. These are people who are sick. the 40 million of the COVID-19 are just tested positive. These are not sick. According to the CDC and hospitals, 80 to 85% experience little to no symptoms. Okay, and the CDC is calling these cases to scare you. And they're quoting a death rate of maybe 3-4%, and the deaths are not correlated to COVID-19. If you look at what, I'm not going to go into, I did it on a different video, they're simply not attributable to the COVID-19, but they're saying they are. They're not. In fact, if you want to go, if that's a fact with the CDC, look at the death rate, the 2017, according to the CDC, of the flu season in the United States was at 5%. I think it was 6.05 or 6.5%. Okay, well, why no paranoia about that? And if you have paranoia about 40 million just testing positive in the world for COVID-19, for the influenza flu, you got actual cases of 40 million in the U.S. And what about all the other countries, all grouped together? How many cases worldwide then? How many hundreds of millions of cases of influenza flu? Just not mention other flus, right? There are other strains of flus, swine flu, bird flu, and many others, okay? We have many viruses in our body, more than 90 to 100 maybe on any particular day, different kinds. Well, the amount of damage to the economy by these hundreds of millions of people of actual cases being sick is far greater than COVID-19, where 80 to 85% experience little to no symptoms. But it's the paranoia that's causing the economies around the world to shut down, because the CDC has convinced people that it's spreading and it's deadly, which it is not. Which it is not. If you look at the numbers and what's going on, it is not. And I covered that in another video in detail, because most people don't look at the detail of what the CDC is saying. But if you look at the detail of what comes out of there, you'll see that they, by their own admission, they say that according to the molecular tests, for the antigen test, that if it tests positive for genetic material, they say, quote, it may suggest that there may be an active case of COVID-19. See? They have no test to say when COVID-19 is actually active. Therefore, they cannot attribute any death or any symptom to COVID-19. And after 40 million instances, when they've come in contact with testing people, they've got no definitive marker. They've got no test of symptoms. They've got like 20 tests, according to the CT, and the Wang has like 15, and some of the symptoms come and go. And they've got, unlike mumps, which has a definitive characteristics, polio, definitive characteristics, and you name any disease, it's in the physician's desk reference or medical literature and classes, there's definitive tests. What the CDC and Wang and those other people are saying about COVID-19 is that they can't distinguish a list by which you can actually determine that there is a disease present and active. So they can't do it by their own admission, okay? And their list, they haven't got one. They've got one that has so many symptoms on it, 15 on this one and 12, 15 on that one, different. They can't. And on admission, they haven't got a test for it. They have no admission for incubation period, right? They have no test for contagious period, see? And when they say infection in medical literature, definition, means when a virus enters your body. It does not mean there's a disease present. It just says the virus has entered and your body is manufacturing antibodies. Now, when it becomes a disease with symptoms, it becomes a disease. And that's called a disease phase. An infection phase is just an infection. There's nothing harmful about an infection. The disease phase is when symptoms arouse, and then you begin to have adverse reactions, okay? We have no test that shows that the disease phase of COVID-19 exists. We have no test for that, according to the CDC. We have no test for that. Yet, look at what they say as though they do. We have no test when this is going to be contagious, and if there's any harm for it. You see, according to the symptoms, there's no way to tell when you have a disease present, even from symptoms. Okay, so why the paranoia? Because it's shutting down the economy, and the central banks that the interbank has installed into parasitic conditions into various countries around the world, all the governments, as you see around the world, are shutting down their economy because of the extreme fear foisted on them by the CDC. And a lot of other, like Harvard and Hopkins, and, it's amazing how they can have such stupid medical people acting as though this is scientifically anything at all, when it is not. Compared to the influenza flu, just for one thing in particular. Look at the difference. I mean, the paranoia is causing central banks now to be getting requests from their central government, from the real governments, for money to help workers out and help the economy out. So the central banks, the branch offices of interbank people, are making a killing, so to speak, on this paranoia. See, and they love it. They love it because they're making a huge amount of money. This is worldwide. You see, this hasn't happened for the central bank people as a sales day, for them. I don't think ever. And the end result here is very interesting, and it's really problematic because as the stimulus packages are still being suggested, the central bank of the United States, quote, of the Federal Reserve is saying, yes, you should have more stimulus money, and we'll do another $3 million here, and we've gone into the bond market and purchased stuff for our account, which is a lie, because they just loaned the money in the same way, right? They don't have an account anyway. So they've just put trillions more in the bond market, diluting the U.S. dollar even more. Well, what is this going to do to China? Then see, it's going to cause hyperinflation in the United States, which is going to gut the United States to the core, like it has Venezuela, right? Or doing now, or Argentina before that, or Zimbabwe before that. Same way, the government did the same thing in conjunction. I don't know about interbank and though, but the government is responsible for these things, and ultimately. And the people are clamoring for it because the economy shut down because of the paranoia. It's what a vicious circle. And so when the U.S. dollar goes into hyperinflation, China, which has a huge amount, one of the largest cash holdings of U.S. treasuries, of course, the value of those will tank, right? Basically, the value of the U.S. dollar will go to zero, essentially, may as well. At 1,000,000%, 10 million%, like Venezuela is supposed to be this year, it's you just divide it by what you got by 10 million, that's all, or a million, whatever. And, of course, it will devastate the economy of China because the U.S. is the prime importer from China, okay? So that'll ruin our economy and China's economy, and President Xi will he'll have so many million in starvation in his country as a result. The U.S. will have same way. Oh yeah, it will happen. Venezuela, they say the majority of the population is on the border of starvation, and many are dying. Okay, this is typical for hyperinflation. That's all. No food, no medicine, no jobs, and no personal safety. And so their interbank will stand with President Xi's country, experiencing high starvation. And of course, you can see what's going to happen. And this is the purpose, and this is the big plum. You see, that interbank is going to get out of this thing. Sure, they're making a killing right now, but when they take down China, and the wealth is there, because one of the things that the interbank does is first they gut the country of the government's wealth, and then they take the wealth out of the people. There are two things to do, okay? So China has a huge wealth in the government and a huge wealth in the civilization, in the citizens. Well, okay. There you have it. If we can stop the paranoia around the world, well, this won't happen. But trying to stop the paranoia, and so so if these two countries, China and the U.S., have got no money to import anything from around the world, which essentially has happened, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and Argentina, well, guess what's going to happen to other countries around the world? Their economies are already in bad shape. And now they can't export to the U.S. and to China, which is the biggest importers from around the world. Well, this is a grand worldwide depression. That's basically a grand worldwide depression, far greater than the fall of Rome in the 400s A.D., right? This is just the you look at the mechanism going forward, and this is the road that the world is on right now. Okay, this is the road that the world is on, and it's being generated by the paranoia, and the paranoia is being promoted by the CDC and a few other organizations